to EconVersations. I'm your host, Dan Sutter, with the Johnson Center for Political Economy here at Troy University. We often speak on this show about the free enterprise system and the role that businesses play in this free enterprise system. Businesses provide many of the great things that we enjoy in life. They provide the opportunity for people to start businesses and fulfill their destinies and flourish as human beings. You would think that this would be an important component of what young business leaders are taught in our schools of business across the country. But it turns out that may not quite be the case. To discuss how free enterprise system is portrayed in business education, we have with us on the show tonight Dr. Derek Yonai.
Thank you for having me on the air. I appreciate it.
Derek is the director of the newly created Center for Free Enterprise at Florida Southern University, and you've also been involved in this issue of free enterprise education for business for quite some time. So tell us a little bit about what is meant by this role of free enterprise education in business.
Well, the role of free enterprise education in business basically consists of rehumanizing business education. Business education in this country is focused primarily around how to do business and tools. What I want to do is bring back the social component. How does business enable people to flourish? How does economic freedom and business opportunities create the ability to use creativity productively, create job opportunities, and enable us to have a better life?
And before moving to Florida Southern, you've been involved with this at Campbell University, where you had a program or a position that was designed with this in mind, right?
That's exactly right. At Campbell University, I was the Lundy Chair of the Philosophy of Business, which was founded in 1975. The interesting thing about that was we had a business person, Burroughs T. Lundy, who was a meat packer, and the university president, Norman Adrian Wiggins, who came together simultaneously and said, business education in this country is lacking. Mm-hmm. They're focusing on mathematical skills. They're not learning the philosophy of business, how it is business gives back to our community. And they decided what they would do is create a position, a professor there who would teach the philosophy of business to all of their business students so mm-hmm. that their graduates would be able to go out and become future business leaders of North Carolina and understand the value business has in our free enterprise system and how it enables us to tap into that creativity and that flourishing aspect of human existence.
So what are some of the benefits then of the free enterprise or economic freedom that you talk about in this course?
Well, what I focus on is the fact that as human beings, what we care about is benefiting and helping other people around us. Mm-hmm. And what I show them is that through economic freedom, basically the objective measure of how much free enterprise exists in a system, that people are able to do more with fewer resources and able to help improve other people's lives. So with economic freedom, we're measuring the size of government, we're measuring the rule of law, we're measuring how well money is controlled in terms of how much inflation there is, the ability to have international trade and regulation. And when we pull all that together, what we're able to see is that those places where we allow people's creativity to be untapped and go out and flourish without any restrictions on them are able to create more opportunities, create a better, if you will, ecosystem for people in their environment to be productive and provide jobs for other people. And it's great when I can show them how economic freedom correlates quite nicely with higher income, but more mm-hmm. importantly, how economic freedom in the free enterprise system also correlates with lower levels of poverty. Mm-hmm. So it's not just the rich getting richer, but that this is an ecosystem where all people are made better off by being able to tap into that creativity and the ability to use those innate gifts and talents we were all born with in order to help support and sustain other people in our society.
Well, and as you point out, with human flourishing, economic freedom is really about a lot more than just the operation of the economy. It's about people who have a dream and want to try and start a business. People are trying to seek fulfillment in life, and our businesses in the business world and the free enterprise system allow them to do that, right?
That's exactly right, and that's what I love about teaching the free enterprise courses at Campbell and in the future at Florida Southern is that it gives me the opportunity to take that student out of, if you will, that cold, mechanical world of business and say, look, this is how we can improve the people around you. Here's how being able to be free, have creative thoughts, have creative ideas, trying new things that nobody's ever done before, being able to take risks, enable us to have a first world standard of living that is the envy of everybody else around us, and how it is we can tap into that and improve lives, create jobs, improve wages, and be able to provide better products and services than ever existed before. And for the students, it's amazing because they never thought of business from that perspective. They always saw it as, well, we're here to make profit, as opposed to profit isn't everything. Profit is merely the measure of how well did you improve somebody else's life.
Business is really a profoundly moral human activity, right?
Exactly. It's about human dignity. It's about protecting who you are as an individual by beginning with that proposition, you own yourself. You own your skills and talents. For many college students, and I have to remind them of this, the reason they're in college and the reason they spend so much money on education is that they're investing in themselves. That the reason they're going to earn more money is because they are more valuable, because they can be more productive, they can bring more to the table when they bargain for that first job than they would have been able to out of high school. And what enables them to do is say, you own yourself, you're making this investment in yourself. There's an innate understanding of that. There's a dignity there. And what you need to have is that freedom to use those skills, use that creativity, basically live what Socrates would describe as a meaningful life, and at the same time, improve the lives of others who are going to reward you by being able to pay for those services that they value.
And although there's the narrow, but the personal level of business allowing the individual flourishing, but we also need a system in which businesses are allowed to flourish, and that involves several different components.
That's exactly right. So I always remind people, even though I'm a business professor, I'm a trained social scientist. And as a social scientist, what we have to have is an ecosystem, if you will, that supports our business world. I always remind my business students, all of the things you do only matter if the rest of that foundation exists. And that foundation consists of having to have the rule of law. We have to have stable rules of the game so that we can make plans going forward, so we know what we can or can't do, what would be at stake or what won't be at stake. But we also have to have good governance. We have to have a government that will enforce those rules, that will abide by those rules, that will enforce contracts. And then we also have that last leg, an economic system that allows us to take advantage of the market process, that allows us to transmit personal and subjective knowledge between all these different people in the world and coordinate around providing products and services for people that they don't even know exist, and yet improves their lives. So it's basically like a gigantic bar stool where you have these three legs and you have to have them all in place in order to support what it is our business students do. And the problem is that we don't teach them the bar legs on average. They just focus on what do I do on top, and my goal is to remind them of all of the things that have to exist at the foundation to enable them to improve other people's lives.
And that's quite significant, because we do need to have a well-functioning free enterprise system that in which government doesn't do too much, doesn't impose burdensome regulations, or doesn't attempt to play favorites, to have this system of progress and prosperity and the underlying businesses going forth in this system, right?
Exactly right. It's like I ask my students, if you have a sibling, remember how unfair it was when your parents picked your sibling over you and you were angry and emotional about it? Well, the same thing carries over in business. When we give incentives or we give tax breaks to some businesses but not to others, what we're doing is we're picking and choosing favorites, and that diminishes other businesses' ability to say, do I really want to take a stake into this market when somebody else who comes in will get a benefit that I won't? And it discourages employees and it discourages employers from coming in and improving the world, because the game's not certain. It's unfair, and they would rather hold back and say, look, let's wait until maybe the government figures out that we have to have a fair playing field, and then we'll bring our ball back to the court, and then we'll participate. It's that uncertainty that gets created when we think we're making the world a better place that actually makes it harder for us to create those job opportunities.
Well, certainly one of the important elements of this is that many times we seem to see business leaders make statements or take actions that don't seem to be consistent with this system of free enterprise that we need to have to actually sustain the enterprises that they're actually running or starting.
And that's the big problem, is that by focusing just on how to do business and on the technical aspect and forgetting the soul, if you will, of business, you end up with a lot of people who have great skill, great talent. They're able to go out there and be very efficient and very effective at what they do, but they've lost the, if you will, grounding notion of what are they supposed to do in society? How are they supposed to create wealth by creating win-win situations? And what they lack, if you will, is that moral and ethical understanding of how it is cronyism or backroom dealings or creating that unfair environment actually harms the rest of us and deters other people from jumping into the business game. So for me, the idea is training the future business leaders of tomorrow to understand not just how to do it, training their hands, but also training their minds so that they have some judgment and some understanding behind what it is they're doing and the greater implications on the rest of us of what it is they're doing.
No, I mean, I'm sure some of our viewers are probably thinking here, like, well, free enterprise is at the heart of business. I mean, shouldn't that have been covered on like day one of business school? And, you know, shouldn't there be people be learning things like, you know, here we have Gordon Gekko from the movie Wall Street, but I mean, shouldn't people be learning that they're part of the free enterprise system in the role of business on day one anyway? If the business schools aren't covering this, what are they covering?
What they're covering, again, are the mechanics of business, the mathematical aspects of business, the statistical aspects of business, the ability to market a program well, the ability to write a business plan. They're very well focused on how to go about and do business, but part of that presupposes and assumes that there's a free enterprise system. So I think part of the problem is that everybody assumes we all know what free enterprise is, we assume it exists, so let's just bypass that and focus on skills and technique, especially in higher education where there is, you know, enormous pressure on us to assess and to figure out how well of a job are we doing in the classroom. That puts even more pressure on us to focus on the things we can measure, which unfortunately are the skills and talents. It's the sort of mindless act of, can you do a business plan? Can you follow the proper steps in doing this business proposal, as opposed to trying to really get at the heart of what real education is about, which is, how do you think? Do you understand the philosophy? Do you understand how you fit into a larger society? Do you understand what role you play? And encourage them to become lifelong learners.
Right.
And people who really want to understand how everything fits together as a social unit, as opposed to very hard focus on, this is what I do, this is all I do, and I get paid for it, as opposed to, what role do you play in our larger society?
Some of this might be just due to the, I guess, the division of knowledge or the division of labor in higher education, right? You hire people to teach accounting, and they teach what they know, and it's a very divided silo. You know, we live in our academic silos, and very few people get outside of their silos to see the big picture. So is this just part of that general problem, do you think, of too much focus on what we specifically as academics know from our area of expertise?
I would tend to agree with that. It's the notion that by becoming hyper-specialized and becoming so focused on, if you will, little things, we forget the big picture. So we become very focused on, if you will, the trees. And I've always told my students, my job is to pull you away from the trees so you can see what the forest looks like. And that's difficult. Back 100 years ago, when we had real political economy, where economists had to know something about the law and the politics of their nation, that's where you got to see how it is this whole ecosystem function. But then as soon as you get that fragmentation into their own little special silos, it's I just do that, they just do that, and you lose that connection. Even at a liberal arts school, you'll lose that connection between those different disciplines and how they connect with one another to build this fabric of our society. And especially if you're in business schools, and you're focusing on purely skills and talents, you're not thinking about the fabric of society anymore. I mean, to a certain extent, if you're a business student, you want to know accounting, you want to know your economics, you want to know your marketing and management. And oftentimes, from my experience, they're willing to say, well, why do I have to take a literature class? Why do I have to take a philosophy class? That's not going to help me when I do business. And that's where I grab them in class and say, yes, it will. It's part of the human experience. It's part of that social aspect of having a common culture of literacy, of having a common culture of what the human condition looks like, because we're humans. Business is inherently a social environment of where we are engaging other human beings. And at the end of the day, we're providing something for somebody else that they can't provide for themselves, and they're providing something for us that we can't provide for ourselves. It's that social aspect that completely gets lost when we just focus on spreadsheets, focus on marketing polls. We have to get people back to understanding the true function of business in our larger society.
Now, if we as professors in our individual disciplines maybe get too focused on the trees and not the forest, I mean, seemingly there should be other folks within the academy or within the universities or the higher education establishment that might address these problems. And particularly, there could be like the dean of a business school, administration of a university, or what's probably less familiar to those of us who don't work in higher education, we have these groups called accreditation and specialized accreditation agencies. And so we have accrediting bodies, and they seemingly could play a role here with this. So tell us a little bit about the accrediting bodies for business and whether or not they're addressing this problem.
Well, given the, if you will, intense competition for students in this country, especially for business schools, a lot of business schools, as you said, are becoming accredited. Mm-hmm. The problem with that is assessment. Accrediting bodies would like to make sure that the schools they're accrediting actually do what they claim to do, which means there has to be a measurement component in there. The problem is it's easier to measure the acquisition of a skill than it is to measure the acquisition of, say, philosophy, or mm-hmm. the acquisition of lifelong learning, or the acquisition of learning an idea. So what ends up happening is that accrediting bodies, knowing that they have to assess, and business schools are going to have to assess, focus on what are the skills, what are the things we can objectively measure, and what that creates, if you will, is this race to the bottom, where now everybody who's accredited is going to focus on the same set of skills that the accrediting body has determined as being relevant. And for me, as an economist, I see that as a Gresham's law mm-hmm. Application, where in Gresham's law, good money drives out bad money. If bad money starts coming into your economy, you're going to hang on to the good money because it's worth a lot more, and there's not a whole lot of it out there. Well, if you have a lot of education coming in that's focused on training hands, but not necessarily training minds, what you end up with are a lot of institutions who want to do good and want to produce future business leaders, but what they're doing is they're providing just hands-on training, and they're forgetting to feed and nourish the soul, if you will, these future mm-hmm. business leaders to understand the real impact on society. And that, again, is, for me, where the biggest problem is. Business people are inherently social, but yet if you were to talk to a business student, they would probably never have gotten that in any of their classes. And that's, for me as a social scientist, the most important part, getting them to understand. The skills, yes, are important to do well, but we also have to have the judgment and the wherewithal to understand the proper use of those tools and why those tools work and why those tools exist.
Now, one of the things that might seem to be related to this issue is the recent emphasis, perhaps over the last 10 years or so in business schools, on business ethics, because people looked at firstly examples of like Enron, and then some of the practices in subprime mortgaging and the subprime mortgages in the housing market as, you know, perhaps is this just a problem of greed or a lack of business ethics, and is that leading to some of these problems? Is that what you see as the problem here when you talk about needing to know about the philosophy of business?
Well, for me, it's not an ethics problem or a greed problem. It's really a misunderstanding of what the free enterprise system is. The problem is when you remove the soul of business, you remove, if you will, the constraints, the understanding, the moral prerequisites of what business requires. Mm-hmm. Truth, honesty, respect, being able to treat another person as yourself. Adam Smith would have referred to it as sympathy. And by removing all that, what we've done over the last 40 years is trained a lot of business people who are technically proficient, who basically are told profit maximize, profit maximize, profit maximize, and everything will work out. So they basically follow, if you will, their programming. Mm-hmm. And the problem is there was no cushion around that. There was no judgment around that. The best analogy I can give you is one that I heard from a colleague of mine at Western Carolina. We can train people how to drive cars, and we train them very well to drive automobiles. What was missing is the judgment of what's the proper way to drive that automobile. Mm-hmm. And in this case, we trained a lot of people to do business, to pull that lever of business, earn profit, go out and quote unquote do good. The problem is there was no judgment attached with that as to, is this a good idea? Yes, in the short run it might make profit, but should I care about the short run or should I care about the long run? Right. What are my real concerns? What's my real responsibility? And by not having that humanized business education, you have people out there doing without really understanding the larger implications of what's going on. So that, for me, is ultimately the problem, is that you end up with people who are basically doing everything they've been told to do, but they were never given the conscience, that soul, to be able to understand where that line in the sand is. As an economist, everybody talks about Adam Smith being the founding father of economics. And most people usually say, well, wasn't he the guy who said the invisible hand, pursue your self-interest? And he was. But the thing that I think most people forget is that implicit in pursuing your self-interest was this notion that there were moral and ethical constraints on us, that there was this whole social system that defined what ethical and moral behavior was, that there was this rule of law, good governance, an economic system there that was assumed but not discussed. And what ends up happening in business education, we assume that free enterprise system, we assume that ethical system being in place, when in fact, the problem is by everybody ignoring it, nobody actually ends up getting it, and we just hope they have it. And for me, I see it as my responsibility as a business professor to make sure that my students explicitly understand what the constraints are. That yes, being able to go out and make a profit is a good thing, but the profit is not the end product. That profit is merely the imperfect way we can signal that you've made somebody else in our society better. Without having that judgment, people will misuse that tool. People will misuse those signals and think profit is all that matters. And arguably, that is actually what's immoral. It's no longer about helping somebody else, it's about making more profit. And that's a misinterpretation. It's profit, yes, is what firms maximize according to economics. But socially, that profit is an embodiment of the people you've made better off. And that's the connection we have to make. It's that next step that needs to take place in our schools.
And so you've talked, I think, hinting at some solutions here, but it's to identify problems without any possible solutions is just to sort of give up. So other than us as individual professors maybe changing what we're doing, what can we do to try and solve this problem?
For me, I think the most effective way is to table the discussion. The luxury I had at Campbell University was by being the Lundy Chair and being that free enterprise chair and having that responsibility of making sure that all of our business students understood the social aspect of business and the effect that they have on society, and the notion that yes, these skills are powerful, but yet they have to be used wisely. We need to table that discussion within accrediting bodies. We need to bring that discussion to other schools of business. As educators, are we doing our job by just teaching them the skills? Do we have a responsibility to our students and to our larger society to help our students understand when they go out into the world, they're not just working in a vacuum, even though most of our models pretend they are in a vacuum.
Right.
They're in a world with other human beings who have families, who have feelings, who have wants and desires and dreams of their own, and help them understand how they fit within that larger social fabric. So we need to begin to discuss that approach to business. What do we do? Don't just assume we do it. We need to actually have that formal discussion of, let's break down what we do, why does it work, and how we can basically do it better. Well, we have to train their hands, and we have to train their minds.
Well, hopefully working toward part of the solution to this problem, it could be your new center at Florida Southern. Tell us a little bit about your center there and what you're going to hope it can accomplish in the future.
Well, as you said, it's a brand new center. I've been at Florida Southern now since the beginning of January, and our official launch is in March. And our mission statement, the way I articulate it, is that our purpose is to rehumanize business education, is to bring context back to the set of skills, to the sets of talents that we're going to train our young people with, so when they go out and become future business leaders, they understand their social role in our society. They understand how they contribute back to human flourishing and providing for us a better future by being able to tap into the creativity of entrepreneurs, being able to tap into the talents and innate skills of other people in the world who may become their employees, who may become their trade partners, so that we can pull together this big bowl of resources and be able to provide a better world. And we're going to do that through several, if you will, prongs. We're going to have a business education section where basically we're going to teach free enterprise, where we're going to teach the philosophy of business. Essentially, right now, we're looking at possibly doing a freshman class, so when they come into the business school, we can help from day one say, this is a social enterprise. As part of our free enterprise system, we have to have that rule of law, good governance, an economic system, and here's the role you're going to play. If you stay with us, if you get your degree here and you're going to learn these skills, this is what you contribute back to your society. It's essentially, for me, a nice way for the students not to feel ashamed that they do business. Right. Oftentimes I find business students who feel dirty that they do business, like they're somehow doing something wrong, but they don't really know why.
Students feel like they have to apologize that they're majoring in business.
Right, whereas what they're really doing is learning to become part of the backbone of our economy, the backbone of what gives other people the opportunity to take the skills and talents they have to earn money for their family. And being able to sort of re-energize these students to say, look, this is a social enterprise. We make the world a better place if we do it right. If we understand the role we play, that it's not just about money, it's not just about profit, it's about helping other people flourish. So we're going to do that. We're also going to plan on doing a high school summer camp for rising juniors and seniors to teach them the principles of free enterprise and entrepreneurship, because we need to start young. We need to start with high school students to understand you have a lot of creativity. Let's tap into that, because you have ideas that may in fact make the world a better place and be revolutionary. And there is a mechanism that allows you to do that, and it's called the free enterprise system. And then we're going to finally engage in that research and that public outreach component. You know, oftentimes I think people at universities think our job is just to teach students.
Right.
And my perspective is, as a university, we have a responsibility, of course, to our students. But we also have a responsibility to our community, that we are a source of information, a source of knowledge, a source of expertise, and as such, we can communicate those ideas to the community at large. So for me, the center is going to go out and hold public lectures, workshops for employers who want their employees to have a better grasp of what the free enterprise system does and why it is, you know, we have a business system this way, and how it is competition allows us not to waste resources because it forces us to reward the people who do it effectively, as opposed to rewarding people who do it wastefully. So it's about getting out to the public, getting business people engaged, and getting students engaged. So it's about getting all these different constituencies who are really part of the free enterprise system and empowering them and engaging them to go out and understand that they're really doing great social work that the vast majority of people don't think about.
Well, just very briefly, I mean, do you see any barriers or problems, or what are the obstacles you think you can face with this type of agenda?
I think the biggest obstacle, and I know I'm not going to be the only person facing, is the fact that economics and free enterprise has become highly politicized. This is ultimately the big problem. As soon as you say free enterprise to some people, immediately they think there's a problem or it's politically driven. And I tell people, as an economist, I just ask what is, what was, what will be. I don't care about left, right. I don't care about ideology. What I want to accomplish is what Adam Smith said economists should do. Figure out why some people are rich, why some people are poor, and help elevate the poor. And getting people to understand that free enterprise is about using a mechanism we have in this country to elevate all the ships, all of us, is not a political idea, but an economic idea. An idea is going to be the hardest, if you will, hurdle to overcome.
Well, it sounds like it's an exciting proposition. It's related certainly to some of what we're trying to do here with the Johnson Center at Troy University. So welcome aboard to the fight, although I guess you've been battling the fight for some time there at Campbell University as well. So, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for watching. Join us again next time for another EconVersation.